All right, I'm very happy here today to invite these panelists to talk a little bit about the roll-up space and what's happening in here. I think we have a few different solutions today. And before I start asking the major topics that I want to discuss today, maybe we want to take a quick round of intro about yourself so the audience knows who you are.
Hi, I'm Kenny. I'm co-founder of Manta Network. We are the largest general purpose modular L2.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us. My name is Tom Ngo, CEO at Metis. We're an Ethereum Layer 2 infrastructure.
Hi, my name is Pavel. I'm co-founder of TAC, which is a network extension to TON, allowing EVM applications to tap into the largest distribution market.
Nice to meet you all. This is Marouen. So the first question is really about the relationship between L2s and the Ethereum ecosystem. So we've seen recently with the, oh, hello. You're invited, right? Yeah, okay, good. Can we get a microphone?
Can't you tell? He's a sloth.
Maybe you want to come in and then you can also introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. I'm Cooper from the Movement team. So we're bringing the Move language directly to Ethereum.
Thank you. As I was saying, so with the recent actually growth in roll-up ecosystems in Layer 2, we've seen the, for example, Ethereum transaction costs dropping. We've seen a little bit of actually, audiences focusing on different chains, whether for growth or farming or for launching, or for the ecosystem that it has. And so the main question that I wanted to ask here, how do you see the relationship between the Layer 2s and Ethereum? Is it going towards cannibalization of market share, of activity, or is it a necessary way to scale it? So would love to hear different opinions from the panel. I have one rule, by the way, you're not allowed to say, I agree with him. So let's keep it a bit spicy and see if you have different opinions. We'd love to hear all of them.
Yeah, sure. Well, I have no one to agree with, so I'm off to a good start. So to build on that momentum, I think that there is not really a sense of cannibalization. I think there is a sense of trying to identify product market fit, and at the end of the day, the services are complementary rather than competitive. The reason is because the way I see it is you go back to the trilemma that Vitalik originally proposed many years ago. And no single service essentially solves this trilemma, and maybe marketing people will tell you they do, but at the end of the day, right, from the infrastructure level, looking at decentralization, looking at security, looking at scalability, there's not really one particular infrastructure that provides that singular answer. And so I think we've shifted from figuring that piece out individually to trying to figure it out more collectively. And so when you look at that collective sense, I think a lot of the this sort of trilemma, the pieces kind of fall from the decentralization and security side onto Ethereum, whereas the L2s have shifted more so focus on the scalability side to capture that end user. And so collectively, that ecosystem is solving for that trilemma.
Yeah, I think Ethereum has proved itself to be the cultural hub for crypto. And so even with new L1s that are more performant, more secure, and overall more modern, next generation, they struggle compared to Ethereum to onboard users, onboard liquidity, because once you're somewhere, you don't want to necessarily go elsewhere. And so I wouldn't say that L2s are necessarily cannibalistic, but rather something that enable Ethereum to stay relevant. Because if gas fees remain expensive forever, if we're stuck using languages such as Solidity forever, then ultimately that will hit a brick wall at some point. And so I see L2s as a means of modernizing the chain while paying respect to it as that cultural hub.
Yeah, for me, I see Ethereum L2s was created for the solution for Ethereum. So one cannibalizing another isn't really where I see it. I think with the natural balance of demand and flow, everything will kind of fall into place. Ethereum has become an economic security layer where people can trust and have utilized that even from the eigen level as well. And L2s here are, I think they just hit 10,000 or 10 million active addresses, which is pretty amazing for all L2s. So yeah, L2s here are really not cannibalizing, but it's really supporting in a symbiotic way.
Yeah, I probably should be the last one to comment on Ethereum. But as we were coming out of the stealth mode, that is TON L2. But once again, we view that more in a network extension sense. That's how we position ourselves. And that is, I believe, in a way different from L2. It's a thing of a standalone dispute. But what is important that we being cross VM in a sense, where we benefit both, we're a network extension to TON, but at the same time to EVM world as well, as we solving this trilemma where there is distribution, there are applications and liquidity. EVM is the applications and liquidity. TON is just distribution. So we being a network extension for both, connecting those worlds so the actual user engagement can be tackled, right? Where they're all combined apps, liquidity, and distribution, and that kicks into in a UX-friendly way.
Got it. It's an interesting edge that there is, you have there, so we'll see how it goes. Looking forward to it. The second point that I want to touch on is that there is no denying today there is a ton of L2s, right? There is a lot of chains. So maybe long ago, which means last year, the differentiation was what kind of the technology model? Am I a ZK? Am I an OP? Is there a different technology that I'm using? And that was in a point like the major differentiation on the technology. But now actually we see in other chains that are popping up like I think the story protocol, the abstract chain, and they are more of like, hey, we're a consumer, we are IP, so there's different use cases. I want to hear your take about what you believe are the best strategies to have a unique value proposition as a roll-up, as a chain, and how you activate that for your markets.
For the Metis side, we see interoperability as a key thing and a key factor. The more chains we see, the more abstraction we see. We talk about liquidity abstraction, we're talking about dApp abstraction. You see the same dApps in different ecosystem, but now they're opening up like different, they don't really correlate, right? They have different kind of economy under different chains. So I think with more chains coming along the lines of like, hey, we're general purpose or we're like a focused chain here, I think it will kind of obscure the audience a little bit, which affects adoption. And that's one thing this space is really missing. Hey, how can we bring on the next billion users? The more we abstract, the better it is for the ecosystem. But currently I see that there needs to be an interoperability between all the new layer ones, the different languages as well.
Yeah, I think being meaningfully differentiated is one of the keys, that you don't want to be too similar to the ones in the past, right? And so now we're starting to see people kind of not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but coming with hyper-specific use cases to be meaningfully differentiated, in which I think that if they reach adoption, then they can create a pretty strong moat for themselves. But I think that many of these new chains, particularly ones that are use case driven, may face a difficult time bootstrapping and kind of reaching that critical mass to the point in which they're big enough that their case has solidified the use of their chain specifically, as opposed to launching that application on Ethereum or on a different layer 2.
I'm curious to hear, a little bit from, because you guys have the distribution, so is that a differentiation in itself, or is there other strategies?
Definitely, and to put it into perspective, there are cases where that approach led to kind of a success. Think of Binance BSC, or Coinbase Base, or even Solana. It was FTX Solana, right? Which helped it to gain momentum, and now, building upon the network effect. And that is what strengthens the distribution excess thesis. And that's what we're actually about, because it's once again about this trilemma, where you get those together, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you just distribute where the user is, right? So that's, I believe, how we differentiate ourselves.
Got it. So Kenny, Manta has been going on for a while, right? So you've built a bit of following an ecosystem. How do you see it going? Like, is that feeling like a differentiated ecosystem, or is there something intentionally being done from your side?
Yeah, so is this the same question, or
It's kind
am
of
I
related.
allowed to agree
I wanted to
or
give you
disagree?
something to... It's related, yeah.
Cool. So I think if you take a step back and you really look at the bigger picture here, you know, when we say differentiation, right, like the differentiation is in the context of this starvation mode. And this starvation mode is specifically, oh, hey, Sandeep.
Hello.
Welcome. We're in a panel where we have to disagree with each other. But yeah, so you're in the starvation mode. And the starvation mode is the fact that there's not enough users, right? When you look purely at on-chain metrics and stuff, you can gloat about, you know, 100,000 wallets, 1 million wallets, 10 million wallets, whatever you want to say. But the fact of the matter is, most of that is actually bots, right? Like, there's no denying that. And so in this sort of starvation mode, I think, you know, the differentiation has been primarily focused on technology and the technical sort of nuances. But the reality, I think, is that the technical nuances don't really matter to the end user, and they don't really matter to the application, right? I don't think anyone in this room has ever said, oh, I'm going to use that L2 because their sequencer is decentralized, right? They usually say, I'm going to use that L2 because I'm going to farm the shit out of this thing and then, you know, like make out like a bandit. And so from that perspective, right, like I think like this whole chapter of Web3 that we're in is an unsustainable, experimental Wild West. And at the end of the day, it's not about differentiating on technology, but more so, how do you survive past this chapter, right? How do you get past the Wild West to when the Web3 space really matures and we really onboard that 1 billion users we've been talking about for the past decade? And so like from there, right, like when we look at the technologies, how different L2s are building technologies, why different L2s are building technologies, I don't think it's because we're necessarily trying to differentiate. I mean, we may fool ourselves into thinking that's differentiation, but I think at the end of the day, like, you know, each L2 creating these sort of nuances in their technology is more so providing a greater contribution to the Web3 space, such that once we go into that next chapter, we have a very secure, scalable solution for the entire world.
Got it.
And Manta's doing great.
How are you, Sandeep? Ready to jump into it?
Yes.
All right. So we were talking about differentiation in the rollup and the L2 space. One thing to notice on this panel is that there is few of the chains here are using the CDK technology. There is also like the AG layer narrative, which is a unifying narrative between different chains. And so by building these reusable components that many rollups can build, how do you see the ecosystem on top of it being built? Like what is the ideal end state for it in terms of chains? Is it use case specific? Is it other alternatives? Is it a competition? Is it a complementary relationship?
I think like how I see it, I see that the world is going to be largely use case specific. The chains will be largely use case specific, and with some general purpose chains, like some liquidity hotspots, like 5, 10 of such chains, which will have mix of different applications. But generally, other hundreds of thousands, like I feel that in 5 to 10 years, we will probably have 1 million chains, and this number might look crazy to you. But I feel that by next year itself, we will be probably at 10,000 chains. And this should have exponential growth from there. The primary thesis behind that is that assume that the interchain composability is solved. Like, it's seamless, it's easy to do, user experience is great. Why would any chain, or why would any dApp will exist on a shared chain? Doesn't make any, necessity, doesn't, induces any necessity for them. For example, if Uniswap could exist on a single chain where you could do millions and millions transactions, and people were able to do micro transactions and ARB and all those things, like do arbitrage and all that. And that, Uniswap chain was easy to connect from any other chain. I could, as a user from any existing chain, simply run a particular transaction and say that, okay, I want to swap this 100,000 worth of ETH to USDT and bring me back the USDT, and that transaction goes in for a small fraction of a penny, goes to Uniswap chain, gets swapped, comes back to me at USDC. Then what would be the reason for Uniswap to exist on shared chains? And that is also one of the reasons, one of the visions of AgLayer is that these apps like Aave and Uniswap and all that, they'll probably not even need multiple deployments. They will be deployed on one single of their own chain, the way it works on Web 2. Like, it's not like if you want to reference your tweet on your blog web page, you just have a iframe and you put your tweet there, right? It's not like, you have to have Twitter deployed on your blog website, right? It simply can interconnect, like the data is interoperable. Same thing, the value will be interoperable in Web 3. And that is the core thesis of AgLayer's.
Gotcha. So, assuming, and it's probably highly likely, the interoperability will improve, the UX will improve, and there will be a level of abstraction for the users that it doesn't matter what you're doing on where you're doing it. Now we're seeing obviously a group of chains or app chains that are somewhat aligned. They're Ethereum rollups, and they can probably collaborate quite nicely in that way. But there is also a whole chapter of alt VMs, L1s that are also building and optimizing on areas that supposedly Ethereum has been a limiter and hindering that kind of particular vertical angle. How far can the interoperability and the abstraction go? Like, do we see a future where now, whether you're an alt VM or L1 or an L2, completely abstracted and user transactions will be routed to the right places? Or this is also another area that we have to research and look that, we have to choose Ethereum rollups or L1s?
We are super bullish on alt VMs. And in fact, we are also building one like Polygon Maiden, many people might have heard. Because many of these chains will have their own VM profiles, decentralization profiles, like something like Uniswap, they would want to have a decentralized, kind of sequencer, or somebody like, somebody wants to have some sort of privacy feature into it. They might want to have something like Maiden. People want to use something like Movement, and so this freedom for the developers on what they want to optimize their business use case for is very important. And how we are building AgLayer is that these are all cryptographic signatures for AgLayer. And it doesn't matter which VM they are on, as far as there is a well-defined, and which is the case for every VM, as far as there is a well-defined namespace to identify the chain and then identify the smart contract address, and you have a method to call, I think it will work exactly the same. And how I like to say that is, think of AgLayer as like any chain like Solana or Ethereum or anything, and each address is actually a chain, right? And so, so on the question of alt VM, we are super bullish on that, and I think while EVM has a lot of usage and network effects, but other VMs, like we have seen Solana VM, SVM now has a fair amount of users. I'm pretty sure move-based VMs will have a fair amount of users, and Rust-based like Maiden and all that will also have pretty good number of users. So it's very, very important to provide support to all these VMs.
Got it. Anything you want to add, guys?
I think alt VMs are inevitable, right? And I don't think it's fair to call them alt VMs, right? They're VMs, just like EVM. So, just being politically correct here, and inclusive. But at the end of the day, right, I do think there are options for other VMs, but I do think those options are going to be limited, right? Again, we're in this Wild West experimental chapter of Web3 where everything goes and everyone can tinker with anything they want to, which is awesome, and I hope everyone takes advantage of that. But if you look out into other industries and you think about the timeline of maturity across those industries, right? Like, I mean, who here has any other phone other than an iPhone or an Android? Right, does anyone have a Windows phone? That's an Android. It's a what? It's an Android. Okay, yeah, see, right? It's like, you know, there's iPhone and then there's Android. And then if you go out into, I don't know, cloud computing, right? Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, and then you kind of just fall off a cliff. And you can name countless examples of this in many different industries. So I think that having options is extremely important to foster competitiveness. Otherwise, monopolization fosters, laziness. And so I do think there will be a future where there are options for other VMs, but at the same time, I don't think that's going to be, this proliferation of all these different options that we see today. And also, I'm just kidding. I mean, I call them all VMs too.
Yeah, we heard that.
And Manta's great.
Manta's always great. I'm going to move on to probably the last topic, which is we spoke about the differentiation or the market fit or where does it work. And recently we see two things. So we see user demands whereby users are flocking towards certain chains that have perhaps the right narrative, it has the right usability, the right distribution potentially as well. But at the same time we see other KOLs, like Vitalik, for example, saying that he will not be considering non-stage one rollups, secure enough in a way. I think he gave a deadline. And so there is this kind of technological different specification, I would call it, or requirement or recommendation versus where the users are naturally going anyway, and they don't really care that much about stage one, stage two, and most of them don't know. And so I would like you to comment on this one and see really, is there a way to balance these two things, or ultimately will the user vote by their usage and time and money? Pavel, it would be interesting to see, especially that you're, of course, focusing on this distribution, and do you believe that users will go for the ease of the Telegram network integration and they wouldn't care per se that much, kind of on the technical specificities?
I would probably voice the non-popular view, because I believe the tech is getting more and more academia, but I'll look in the opposite direction of the use case. That's what important. That would make this industry rock in years. It's not, don't judge me, but it's not the iterative, deeper and deeper tech essence of it. That's my point of view. I mean, we are deformated in that sense because we originate from the distribution network, first of all. The tech was introduced there, not the other way around. Yep. The community was not built around the tech. That's why we are not that much based on on the tech side of things. We believe the tech is working already in a way it can be used to provide value add to non-crypto consumers in a consumer application format. And some social platforms, Telegram specifically, allow to onboard seamlessly to utilize the blockchain.
Thank you. Any different opinions?
Yep, I can. I think like last 1 year, the Ethereum community has been very heavily bashed on focusing more on these Ethereum alignment stuff rather than focusing on UX. And I think it has been a hard-learned lesson. So my focus is that I don't want to right now focus too much on these stage one, stage two kind of these narrative things. I want to work on fixing the user experience on these chains, like having as best user experience as it's available anywhere else. And then focusing on many of these stage one nuances. I do understand that there is like a certain level of safety and security you need on the stage one. For example, I'm very much aligned with the like less than, I think it's like less than 30% of the signers of the upgradation multisig to be internal to the project and 60% outside. Perfectly fine with that. Having like chains having ZK proof, perfectly fine with that. But like things like forced transactions, which induce certain amount of risk vectors for some sort of ZK chains, because somebody can force a transaction which is extremely hard or expensive to prove, and then can keep running that kind of running that as a griefing attack vector. So those forced transactions probably won't be a very high priority. So so just to get to and be called stage one, adding those features which don't add a lot of safety for the users. Anything that adds safety for the users, great. But apart from that, it will be more focus on user experience rather than these nomenclature.
Got it. And Cooper, for the Move VM, it's also a bit more about the developer experience, right? So how easy for this developer to build. And so do you see also that sometimes, and potentially outweighing these kind of like specificities of the chain that we have to comply with?
Thank you. Yeah, really good question. So what's really interesting with the Move language is that we see its fastest developer growth rates happening in emerging markets, in places where people are getting connected to the internet, and with that internet access, they're completely leapfrogging the situations they were born into by getting access to the global economy, coming to Web3, and overwhelmingly are coming to Move. Looking at places like Vietnam, like Nigeria, like Bangalore, for example, some of the strongest Move communities being based there. And I think one of the reasons for that is not only looking at Move as a next generation language, but that in learning from Solidity, patching things like reentrancy, as well as taking lessons from Rust in terms of the syntax and how you're actually building your smart contracts, it's easier to learn, it's easier to build with, it's cheaper to audit, and so it's becoming very attractive to folks. However, like we saw in last year with the initial launch of Move chains, it was quite difficult to onboard your users and liquidity. And I think that it's for the simple reason that launching a layer 1 blockchain separate from Ethereum, separate from the broader Web3 ecosystem means you're going to be fighting an uphill battle, because that is what would, and it's not necessarily cannibalistic because it's not one self-consuming one other self, it's a new entity, but playing a PvP game as opposed to one in which people can win together. And so yeah, as much as we are Move maximalists at Movement and believe in the language, above that we're market maximalists and believe that the efficient delivery of technology, as well as having the tools to be able to communicate with other pieces of the network and optimize that, right, bridging a stack and bringing something new to Ethereum is what ultimately is required. And so that's an area where we're super excited and often very quite rely on technologies such as AgLayer to enable the seamless deployment of Move contracts and the data coming from our chain onto Ethereum. So absolutely, it's these kinds of technologies that enable the incubation, because otherwise novel technologies such as the Move VM would hit a brick wall in terms of their adoption without these pieces of infrastructure to facilitate their go-to-market.
Got it. And Tom, you guys have the decentralized sequencer, right, which probably gives a bit more reliability on the back end of things, like ensuring that the chain is meeting higher requirements of security and so on. So would you advocate for more investment towards that side, or is actually, like what Sandeep said, that's enough, now let's improve the other side?
Yeah, going back to the comment about Vitalik and stage one, I think how he's signaling this is very important, and it's really pushing the industry to really beef up and step up and not just say launch a chain and we're okay. It's pushing change to set a new standard, and I think it's important for traditional finance too, as they we speak to a lot of big institutions. They evaluate all this risk. Hey, what's the capital cost? What's the risk we're putting on chain? And that's one of the big things that we would have to, as an industry, consider, because if we want, hey, move the next $1 trillion of assets on chain, these are the things that we do have to look at. And decentralize our sequencer is just one step of the many steps that we see that is important too. being one of the first to decentralize their secrets. It's a small step, but as Kenny said, many chains are focusing on different aspects of the blockchain to improve, right? It's at the end of the day, as an industry, we all collectively come together, learn from each other, then, hey, let's implement this technology just to make it a better environment to really bring on the next $1 trillion of asset on chain and really the utility of blockchain.
Terrific. Kenny, we started the call, like the meeting, very close, and then I feel a bit further and further. Anything you want to add from the other side of the world?
Yeah, distance makes the heart grow fonder, right?
Exactly.
So I'm glad you brought up that point. I think all the points were kind of brought up here, and so I don't want to repeat anything because then I break the rules of agreement here. I think the statement that Vitalik made was taken out of context, right? I mean, despite how direct it is, I think that if that was truly the vision of the entire Web3 space, then there wouldn't be a Solana, there wouldn't be a ton, right? Like everyone would be working on the scalability solutions, and Ethereum would be the de facto answer to the infrastructure side in terms of security, in terms of decentralization. But we know that's not the case. And so, when you look across the board at other L1s, I think the same rule is applied to the L2 side, and everyone's already talked about a lot of these points. So, yeah.
Got it. Well, thank you very much. This has been a good panel for me. Maybe like closing remarks, anything that you would like to share or announce about your particular project, what you're going to be working on, focusing on, for the next few months, takes us to the end of the year. Maybe we'll start from your side.
Yeah, so I touched upon this sometime in one of these answers about how do you survive the Wild West? And I think regardless of what project you're working on the infrastructure level, on the application level, these are things that I hope that you guys are going to be thinking about this entire time, because it's not about, how many users you can attract in the next month or 2 months or so, or how many bots you can get to farm engagement and all that, but really 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you think this space is going to look like, and how are you going to fit in that? Because I can guarantee you that it's going to look completely different from all this. Yeah. And also, if you're interested in Manta, we're hiring too. So, yeah, hit me up.
From the Metis side, we feel like it's important, just not to agree with Kenny, but to put focus on it. We see importance of survival for chains, right? A lot of chains are losing value. They're not really making money. How can they survive living off the treasury? Same thing with projects, right? The economic value has to align. So one of the things at Metis is we want to impose and support projects that are really driving value into the ecosystem. And instead of just giving direct grants, we're also exploring grants to support project, to have kind of delegation to a sequencer, ownership of the network, to really give them another incentive and economic value stream to really survive. Basing on the projects, a lot of projects don't have a great model that really help them sustain, right? So really emitting tokens, and perceived value of the tokens. And if when the transaction slows down, then their treasury really slow down and they run away and strapping to go on another chain to maybe farm airdrops as well. And what we see from our purview is dApps are basically like airdrop farmers as well. They're trying to launch as many chains as possible and really drive the airdrop and really run away like a Reddit. So, but from the Meta side, we want to impose and provide the opportunity for projects that are building to have an opportunity to kind of really contribute to the chain as well, but also get the value for that they're contributing from a dApp perspective.
Thanks. Pavel?
Yeah, looking fast forward 5 years, I think that's how we see, our go-to-market is, tactically and strategically formed, and those future we see the consumer applications being built in tech. And this tech is working already, and EVM community with all the capital, brains invested and time invested there, with the applications and liquidity, which is enough for those new application cases to emerge. Our challenge is to breed those developers of a new kind who understand that this tech is in place They don't have to be engineers and to be developers. They understand that Solidity stack developers, it's a kind of a commodity right now that they can easily reach out to. And if you're successful in using those tools, the distribution channel is there. So hopefully, that vision materializes in consumer apps being there, which yield not only the crypto natives and normies, but regular people.
Got it. Cooper?
Yeah, so we launched our testnet about 2 months ago, having around 200 million transactions, 50 applications deployed right now, many more in the process of deployment. And one of the most exciting things for us is bringing novel technologies directly onto Ethereum in a way that's it's not competitive, but it's actually bringing a lot of biodiversity to the chain, bringing on new developers into the ecosystem and plugging them into technologies and infrastructure to further support them and being based in the Ethereum ecosystem. And so, yeah, I think that this is one of the marks of, we're bringing next-gen language to the chain, but also launching a next-generation L2 that's powered by a lot of incredible technologies throughout the ETH ecosystem.
Yeah, for me, I think it's more of a comment on the, in industry. I was just speaking to some mainstream investors who do invest a little bit in Web3, and they, were also saying that still we see more pitches around infrastructure than any kind of applications. So, there is much more infrastructure than, actual applications. And I was just thinking that, infrastructure domain in crypto needs to go through a harsh winter cycle, like long winter cycle. When I say that, it is very similar to, you see like DeFi, for example. DeFi summer happened in 2020. Since then, I remember in 2021, people are DeFi is dead, DeFi is dead. 21 was the NFT gaming summer. 22, then everything crashed, and then SBF and all that. And in 2024, you now see after like almost 4 years, 4.5 years, you see like Aave doing really well, Uniswap doing well, like a lot of projects thinking of switching on the fee switch and all that. And some of the real projects have survived that winter. And DeFi seems to be a little bit more mature, little bit. Like it's still like fairly that circular economy, like, that you getting token, that's why you are doing that activity and all that. But you see Aave and all, there is like actual, like legit usage. And some of these projects have been able to, create some fundamental revenue streams, value generation and all that. I think infrastructure also has to go through that. Doesn't mean like, the markets will, go into the upswing, the tokens will go well, do well and all that. But I think long term, it seems like, the infra needs to see a hard fought like winter so that like, the more mature and good companies, good projects, which actually end up getting in fundamental usage and revenue on their and revenue model, like successful revenue models on their infra can emerge. Otherwise, what we are seeing is every 6 months we have more and more and more and more and more infra projects coming in. And the problem is that the projects like which have been working for, let's say, multiple years, and they have something like new infra will come with new token incentives and all that, and disrupt them. So, I think the free markets have a way to, create these cycles. And I think like, it's about time for me. I feel so like, that infra should also go through something like that. And only then the mature projects can emerge out of that.
Got it. Where's my co-founder? We're not infra anymore, yeah? pivoting.
Yeah. Too much infra.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It has been a very informative panel, good opinions. Nobody agreed with anybody, so we added to each other. Thank you very much. And yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.